Thank you, Semantic Web community, for coming out tonight. I'm very excited to tell you about Synapsify and who's using it, why they're using it, who we are. What I'll do is I'll show some slides that give some background on the research and on the science. And then we'll look at some demo examples of how it works. And then we'll get into the science. We'll do a deeper dive on the technology, what's going on in the algorithms. Up until we get through the first demo, and before we through the whole presentation, please feel free to interrupt if you just aren't getting something that's technical, but know that we're going to leave a good half hour, 45 minutes for a really engaging Q&A at the end of the presentation. So invite, if you're just not getting it, please interrupt, ask the question, but save favorite questions for the end. So, so this is great not to have only 5 minutes to blow through this, because I did the one with Scott in 5, and then 2 weeks ago I was here for Santa Monica New Technology at 5. So, Synapsify is based in Washington, D.C. I was actually at our headquarters last week, all week in Bethesda, Maryland. I'm our LA satellite. I'm based in Long Beach and have lived in the LA area for about 20 years, but grew up in the DC area and actually met Lawrence Al, the chief scientist, chief inventor, through family connections through my mother. Lawrence's wife was taking my mom's painting class, so that's how I met Lawrence a couple of years ago. So just a little background on us. We've raised $750,000 in seed funding, and we have one patent granted. It was granted last September. 2 patents pending. We'll take a look at those. We have 4 clients. 1 is paying, and 3 are in beta. And we're hosted on AWS. It's a cloud-based solution. We're fully product ready. So, has anyone read this book by Isaac Asimov? So, the name Synapsify actually comes from this book, which I just found this out last week on my trip to Bethesda, Things You Learn. And we've actually painted that green in the cover as sort of the note to the paint. But I've read a bunch of Asimov's books, and I hadn't read this one. I guess it's his first novel. And the hero suddenly is transported 50,000 years into the future into a world that is lost and enshrouded in myths and theories, not anything like today. Schwartz has made the test subject for a machine called the Synapsifier, which will increase human learning capacities. They think this guy's mentally efficient, and they need to upscale him to 50,000 years in the future. So, in a way, I mean, this is kind of what semantic web technology is doing. This is what really Synapsify is about, is helping to make us smarter and help make analysts who are trying to consume a lot of text smarter at what they do, and make it easier for them to understand massive amounts of text. We're very, very excited that Forbes recognized us a couple of weeks ago as one of 10 cloud startups changing their data landscape. So there's this problem of content overload. There are dozens of ways that this slide is presented. Sometimes the kaleidoscope prism of all the media types and the acceleration of media. And a big part of what Synapsify is about is not only helping with the consumer-generated stuff, all the product reviews, all the comments in Facebook and blogs, but also self-publishing titles, long-form narratives. So we're really confident and have tested on a lot of different formats, whether it's a tweet or novel, we can give new levels of insight and meaning. And a lot of what we're doing is really helping our clients skim off in the top layer the best written stuff, the stuff that's the most meaningful. And in this pile of millions and millions of comments, it's just a lot of garbage. And so this filtering problem is really important to understanding social media, understanding a lot of unstructured text. We had a day with a Forst research analyst last week, and she said that this slide really needs to be about business intelligence. That's probably a much bigger market opportunity than just the 3.8 billion of enterprise search and text analytics combined. But BI is certainly where our clients are playing today. This is a slide from Gartner Research, and unfortunately most of the text analytics vendors today are in this trough of disillusionment. So this is the technology hype cycle. And so as new technologies get introduced, right now the newest ones that Gartner is saying are human augmentation and quantum computing, it goes through this peak of inflated expectations, which is where you've got social analytics today. I was at Visible Technologies for 5 years, one of the first social analytics companies. And I think there's a lot of accuracy to this graph. And certainly a lot of the people I'm talking to are using in-market text analytics solutions. They're not happy. They're too expensive. They're not fast enough. The insights aren't actionable enough. But what's exciting about Synapsify is not only are we doing text analytics, we're getting very close to being able to do automatic content recognition. We are being used for social analytics. And we believe that we're an excellent solution for predictive analytics as well. So we're really kind of cutting across these 4 different layers of technology that are in market and new today. We really believe that we've got something new, that we've got something different, that looks at phonemes, that looks at sound, that looks at metaphor, and looks at narrative and causality, like Scott said. Now there are the traditional ways of doing text analytics in the market today are some combination of NLP or probabilistic methods. At Visible, the automated sentiment analysis was done using machine learning with some light NLP. So Norvig is the chief data scientist, technology officer at Google, and they're really getting good at understanding just about everything just from math, just from the data, just from the numbers. But they're really not getting into why people write, what's being said, and the qualitative side of the text, and that's where Synapsify can really help. Another unique thing about Synapsify is that it works out of the box. Almost all the other text analytics solutions require ontologies to be set up, customized dictionaries, taxonomies. It can take weeks or months to get these set up, to teach the system about the industry-specific jargon and language and word associations before you can use it. So we'll get into why that works in a second. So this is the team. Lawrence, who we'll talk a lot about, his wife was taking my mom's painting class in Reston, Virginia. He's got a really interesting story. His father immigrated from China in the 1940s and built one of the first particle accelerators at Columbia University. So Lawrence kind of grew up with quantum physics, quantum mechanics as sort of his way of looking at the world. His background is in operations research. He worked as a quant, as a data scientist, computer programmer at Wall Street for a number of years in the 1980s. He's been working on content analysis and data analytics for a long time. The real breakthrough for Synapsify happened when he was working on Lumify. Did anyone ever hear of Lumify? It was a sort of research-oriented search engine. Worked a lot like Google. Lawrence felt that it had even better accuracy than Google. But like a lot of semantic technology 10 years ago, cloud computing wasn't really readily available, so there was a big scaling problem. To do the computations, just to do the math, he needed about $15 million just to have enough hardware to really scale his system. And the other problem is that if he was looking at a text file more than about a megabyte, the computations just exploded, and that's where the resource power really got out of hand. So he became aware of some technology that could read text and match it to the Dewey Decimal System. So it was a way of classifying books. And he was amazed because it could get 540 on the SAT, the verbal portion of the SAT, just by matching word formations, word forms, really essentially looking at the phonemes, and matching the multiple choice answers to the question. You get 540. So he started thinking about phonemes, and he started thinking about the shape of words, the structure of words in a different way. And the real breakthrough happened when he was on vacation in Cairo, Egypt, about 5 or 6 years ago. He realized that even though he doesn't understand any Arabic, he's a native Cantonese speaker, he's English and Cantonese together. he doesn't know Arabic, but he could understand very clearly the sentiment, emotion, tone, of all the conversations taking place around him throughout Cairo. So between his thoughts about this Dewey Decimal technology that worked on phonemes and all of the meaning that he felt was available from the sound of language, that really led to the breakthrough pattern, the breakthrough algorithm of Synapsify, which is phonemic-based text analytics. And it actually has a different official title, I'll show you in a second. But just so everyone's clear, a phoneme, there are 52 of them in English. If you're looking at a definition in the dictionary, these are the phonemes right here. It's the phonetic spelling, the pronunciation, it's the sound that's coded in language. That's what phonemes are. And sound is just fundamental to language. I mean, this little guy, or girl, speaks a universal language. Everyone understands it. And mothers worldwide speak the same language back, the cooing sounds, the comforting sounds. If you think about chordal transitions from major to minor key in music, there's a very specific mood implied. Going back to the baby's metaphor, if you think about the near gibberish of Teletubbies, you still get it in the tone and the sound. And I heard somebody told me there's a show in England similar to Teletubbies where it's all completely gibberish. There are actually no words used. So there's a lot of information in the sound. And no one is using it to understand meaning, to apply it to text analytics today. And if you think about language, we've had hundreds of thousands of years of language, maybe 1 million years of language as humans, and it's only very recently that it was ever written down. So language fundamentally is sound, it's an oral tradition. If you think about the bards of old, who told long heroic tales using rhyming and sound and music as a way to memorize incredibly long narrative. But they also were telling stories rich with metaphor. And were telling stories that were carried by a hero, carried by someone who has an expression of strong intent, the protagonist in most cases of the novel or of the story. So this is a quote from the last patent that Lawrence filed, and it's that language would be meaningless without stories about intent. So whether the story is a novel or a tweet, there is at least one intention usually being expressed. I mean, no one writes a tweet if they're not hoping to change something. If they want customer service, they want to be heard, there's some intention being expressed. And increasingly the story of a brand, the narrative of a brand, is being written by the customers in social media. So stories are everywhere, and we believe that you can't really understand language algorithmically if you're not thinking about sound, metaphor, and intent together. So the original patent is actually called System and Method for Analyzing Text Using Emotional Intelligence Factors. That's the patent that was granted in September. Within the patent, you see that it works on phonemes, it works on sounds implied in the language, and we'll get into much more technical detail about how that works. The second patent that's pending, resonant metaphor analysis, identifies metaphor construction in language, and metaphor is often the richest, most important aspect of language. It's one of the key indicators of quality writing. Writing that lacks any type of metaphor usually lacks quality. And so the third thing is causality, an intent analysis, and actually the ability to do automated dictionary construction all in one patent application. We'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by causality. Actually, just quickly, let me go into this technology a little. We'll have some more slides that explain it. But we find metaphor first by looking for very meaningful words through dictionary hookups. We're hooked into WordNet, and we're also hooking into Wiktionary. And we find words that have longer dictionary definitions and longer lists of citations. We understand that those are more meaningful. When we find lots of meaningful words, clustering and trigram formations that look like metaphors, then we start to score metaphor formation that way. When we talk about causality, we're looking for not only for words that have dictionary entries with the words in each other, but we're also looking at word ordering So, if somebody's talking about the Empire State Building and then a bomb, rather than a bomb and then the Empire State Building, that means something. There's a difference in the meaning. So if we find other words that are about buildings or that are about explosives and they're happening in a specific order repeatedly, that's what we mean by causality. And then finding themes that have different causal relationships to one another, a very strong indicator of the most important aspects in a text, whether it's long form or a collection of social media comments. So essentially what Synapsify is doing is it's reading any form of text, revealing multiple characteristics of the text using the technology I've talked about. It ranks and scores the text. We'll look at our metrics. And essentially raises the best written, most useful, most meaningful, most valuable text to the top of the stack. These are some of our metrics. Credibility is really a core metric in our platform, and it's determined it's determined solely from the sound. So it's using just the first patent, the first algorithm. What we mean by credibility is an author who writes with a balance of positive and negative emotional expressions. If someone lacks credibility, you typically think of that as ranting. And that's when the emotional expressions are all positive or all negative for a sustained number of syllables, same number of words. So credible authors have a nice balance, they have an even tone. We've talked about meaningfulness. And gravitas is a very important metric. It's the combination of credibility and meaningfulness in our systems. It's using the phonemics, it's using the metaphor analysis, and finding statements that have gravitas, literally. Those are real hot spots in the conversation that are important. So we're looking at things like dramatic tension based on a tone analysis. Thematics is based on all three of the algorithms. Causality, looking for words that have causal relationships, is very important to identifying the most important themes in any piece of text that we analyze. And we go all the way through to writing quality, with overall numbers that are actually applied to any piece of texting, how well written it is. So the platform is currently available by API. We have a developer portal, developer.go.synapsify.com. Put it up later, and you can go test it out for free. There are two levels at which the API works. One is just analyzing the first batch of text you put in. It does all different types of analysis we were talking about and more. But then you can also create exemplars. You can say, you can tag your spreadsheet of comments and say, these are the ones that represent positive sentiment for the brand. These are the ones that represent customer service issues. These are the ones that represent potential advocates. And then the system will create exemplar sets, and it can search the rest of the text to find the best matches to your exemplars, and look at some examples of that tonight. So in some ways what we're doing is we're empowering what I like to think of as Pandora for text. I mean, we're really looking at the DNA of language in a new way, looking at the sound inherent in language. This is a long-form narrative graph that's showing a lot of the different things that are going on within Synapsify. So I talked about those, the emotional intelligence factors in text and the pattern based on phonemes. We're actually looking at chordal structures that are created by the phonemes. So it just takes really one or two phonemes together, if you think of notes on a guitar, to create the equivalent of a musical chord. The transition from one musical chord created by a set of phonemes to the next group of phonemes has a specific emotional intensity and a specific emotional valence. So across three dimensions of feeling, thinking, and needs. These are all coded into our emotional intelligence dictionary. So this is at one level just showing, this is Bill Clinton's speech to the DNC last September. It's actually showing the graph, the sound graph of the emotions just revealed by the sound. When you have these red lines, that's when you have a higher degree of credibility, because you have this back and forth positive and negative tone that builds. Here he goes into a rant. Everything dips. And that's what people do. That's the way we talk. But you do that too much, you don't become president of the United States. So we'll look at some more of these in a minute. So, so the main use cases is social media analytics, consumer reviews, online newspapers and magazines, all the comments, and really organizing all the articles as well. And CRM is where our clients are most interested today. We're based in Washington, D.C., so we obviously have a lot of interest around this one. And content management is great for our lead investor, Ingram Books. So lots of ways you can use this software. Has anybody heard of Ingram Books? Does anyone know what they do? They're what? Very few people. They're this massive company based in Nashville. They started in the 19th century with logging. They needed to get the logs from the North Woods of Minnesota to market, so they bought the barges, and they built the supply chain. You might have heard of Ingram Micro. They're a huge OEM that essentially uses that same business model today. It's an offshoot of the same family. Well, in the 60s, they started buying book depositories, transitioned from lumber to paper, and got into books. And so if you buy books on Amazon, if you buy books at almost any bookstore, it's probably gone through the Ingram system. They have the supply chain, the inventory, the warehousing. And so if you're a bookstore, you don't have relationships with 100 publishers. You just go to Ingram Books. So they've got 11 million books digitized on servers, and so they're very interested in kind of pattern mapping, this kind of maybe recommendation engines and sort of Pandora for text use case. So let's take a look at some examples, and then we'll go into some more of the details. Any questions before I go on? Anything that's not clear in what I've said? Okay, great. So the first thing we're going to look at is Obama's inaugural speech back in January. And we're going to look at what we do to the speech. So we run it through Synapsify, and we look at each paragraph and rank each paragraph for thematics. And we score it on about 10 different dimensions on the whole spreadsheet. But I talked about credibility, talked about meaningfulness. Those are important components of thematics, but even more important is that the paragraph contains a theme that has a lot of causal relationships, the other themes in the speech. And so the one that we said was the most important quote, thematically, or the highest theme rank, was this quote where it's the 12th paragraph in the speech where he says that preserving our individual freedoms ultimately requires collective action. What we're saying is the second most important theme of the speech is contained within this paragraph, the first paragraph of the speech, this idea of equality. And so what I love about what Synapsify did is that it confirms the headlines. So when you look at what the reporters said about the speech, they said that it was a call to collective action. And, in CNN, and they, addressed the nation, called on Americans to come together for a common purpose. The overarching theme was equality. And the Guardian echoed the same sentiment. So we get a lot of confirmation, whether it's from the way news is reported, or the way analysts who look at our data say, yeah, this is the way I determine the important themes. You guys, we're having a 91% match to human analysts right now in terms of just identifying important themes. Last week, the Pope said something that was amazing. I mean, for the Pope to say, who am I to judge? It's incredible. That's his job. I mean, and so this got a lot of news, made headlines, and when we looked at the speech, this pulled right to the top of the paragraphs that we found to be important, although this was just one aspect of that speech. And if you look at the graph of that speech, what the Pope was talking about, you can see that it forms a theme here. These layers, each layer represents one of the primary themes in the speech. There's a legend that shows that some of the causal words, the words that are within the root cause, that are within the causal theme formation that we're identifying, is about marginalization. And so each color layer is showing you that this is a point in the speech where that theme is most resonant. So again, a lot of the way this analysis looks and is used comes from really the first use case for Synapsify, which is how can we read novels? How can we read books? How can we find the story arc? How can we find the resolution point? Where's the dramatic tension? Those are the things that, that's what you do if you're a literature major. This actually brings together a lot of my passions. I have an MFA in poetry. I studied creative writing 20 years ago, and before that I studied political science, and then my career's been in marketing. So I'm just really excited about what we're bringing to market here in terms of this literary approach to really any form of text analysis. So this is a theme formation in the speech, the beginning of the speech, talking about forgiveness related to the pedophilia scandals. But what we see here is where we get this theme boost where the blue line just pins to the top of the graph is when he's talking about gay rights and the rights of gay individuals within the church. That this actually had greater thematic resonance, and it was the one point in the speech where it actually pinned to the top of the graph. So that's part of the reason we located that theme is so important. So Synapsify is using three core algorithms of sound, metaphor, and causality. And so let's look at a little more detail about what's going on. So, as I mentioned, emotion is implied by the phonemes. And it's implied by the chordal transition. Literally, if we're saying a group of phonemes is like a G flat, and you go to a C sharp, that is where we're pulling the information, in that chordal transition. So it's these clusters of phonemes, and we've analyzed all the common chordal transitions between our translation of word sound into music. And out of all of the chordal transitions we've identified, we found that there are about 400 that regularly occur. And each chordal transition represents this specific mood or emotion, as I mentioned. So what we have is, in the patent, if you look it up, is you'll see this emotional intelligence dictionary. And so each musical chord that we translated the phonemes into is given a number. So if you're going from chord 0 to chord 27, we have a label for that sound. We call it encouragement. The words where you see the history tag and then a phrase in quotes, that's a sound that actually has the 0 to 27 transition in it. Should be fine as the sound of encouragement. And literally that's what that means, right? And then there are different valences of positive and negative, feeling, thinking, and needs, those dimension lines you saw on the graph, coded into that chordal transition. If it says chordal theme, we didn't find an exact exemplar, but ah yes is the name of chord 1, torture is the name of chord 29. When you transition from the chord that we call ah yes to the chord that we call torture, we call that sound sensing discomfort. So we've got over 1,000 of these sound transitions mapped and coded into the system, and that's really what's happening underneath it all. Any questions on this?
Is this kind of akin to like Sanskrit? They say what you say is part of your vocal sound. I mean, it sounds like you're doing it in English.
I love that analogy. I mean, and I think that Lawrence has done a lot of personal research and personal work around Eastern mystical traditions. So there's no doubt about that. It's not literally taken from Sanskrit, but that is an important concept. And obviously, within Tibetan chanting, the sounds are very important to the meditation, to the emotion. Right?
Well, obviously, this is it's like a Western version.
That's right.
What little I know about Sanskrit and how
Yeah, I don't know about Sanskrit, but I know that there are some analogies to Tibetan chanting. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, what do you mean by chordal theme, and why don't all of them have it?
They all do. I'm just showing
just the
that.
brief.
Yeah, I'm just showing an abridged version of what's actually there.
So what is it? What is a chordal theme?
Oh, this is the chordal theme is actually sensing discomfort. Ah yes is the name of chord number 1. Torture is the name of chord 29. So that transition from 1 to 29 is what we mean by the chordal theme. The actual sound of that transition.
Like a chord.
musical chord. We're translating the phonemes into musical chords.
Would you just step back for a moment and explain why the number one corresponds to yes and how torture corresponds to
There's actually a spectrum. So,
Yeah, yeah.
of the lower number chords are the most positive sounds, and the higher number chords are the more negative sounds.
Okay, so is this, are those, would torture be words from anything?
Yes. Whenever that sound appears, we call that sound torture, no matter where it shows up.
And is, and it can mean multiple languages, like, so what else would be torture?
Well, we're only doing this in English.
No, I mean, multiple words, so what else would be
Yeah.
torture?
Yeah, I don't have other examples of there are thousands of chord transitions. But,
So how could 27 be fine, when it should be fine, and yet 29 be torture?
well, this is a verbatim example of the transition from 0 to 27. So the word fine, the sound within it has something like a more negative spectrum, probably. Even though, so that's why this isn't really about contextual sentiment, because when I start showing you what we mean by tone, it doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. It's all contextual. A couple more questions, and I'm going to keep going back.
Well, you mentioned prison speech and Obama's and the code.
Yeah.
Was the analysis you guys did, was it taken just from the text?
That's taken just from the text. So we think that we can probably, in about a year, build the best speech-to-text converter in the world using this technology. But for now, we used a transcript of the speech.
So there's been a lot of talk about sound, but you're not analyzing sound, you're analyzing text.
We're analyzing text using the sounds implied by the phonemes in the text.
How do you guys deal with alternatives then? Like where you have a pronunciation of a word, but it can be pronounced in two different ways?
Well, again, we're analyzing the text, not the pronunciation. Now, what's great is if there's a misspelling, we're looking at the phoneme. So we'll oftentimes get it right because they might have spelled it wrong, but the sound, the phoneme still shows up the same way. That's what you mean. But we're not. But to your point, if it's dialects, it would just have to be written that way.
Have you done analysis of, let's say, emails,
Yeah.
short text kind of versus the long?
Yeah, we've done everything from tweets to novels and everything in between. So what's nice about Enron, one thing that's nice about it, is that all of the emails are publicly available online. So we've downloaded thousands of Enron emails and analyzed them. And it's pretty interesting. We can find authors who have something called leadership charisma, because when they write emails, they generate long chains. But just based on the quality of the writing, we can predict which employees as email authors are likely to generate a lot of activity. So one of our use cases for HR is in succession planning, leadership identification, even job matching. When people write a mission statement about what they're interested in, we could do a really good job of matching candidates to jobs. So email's a really good use case. Also, smoking gun emails for e-discovery is one of the original clients of Lawrence's technology.
How have you, or are you looking at this technology in the mental health industry?
We haven't looked at it at all.
And identifying outliers before they...
In terms of mental health, yeah, it sounds interesting. We haven't really looked at that. Is your background in psychology?
No.
Okay.
No, but I've heard of research being done with identifying sociopaths through their writing and their tweets.
Well, it's interesting. We've analyzed some of Hitler's speeches and compared them to Martin Luther King's, for example. And Hitler will actually rant, of course, but he also has passages with high degree of credibility. And what he has is this amazing combination of what we call credibility and instability within the same speech. You can't get away with that here, at least not yet. Thank goodness.
So basically, the The speech was translated into
It
English
was translated in English, yeah. It was the English translation.
with language has some differences.
It does. I can't wait till we have this in German and French and run it directly. Because you're right, I'm sure we're missing some things.
Oh, one more question. What about slang?
Slang. Like I said, we'll pick up the sound, right? But what we're doing is we have something called automated dictionary construction. So we're actually understanding what new words mean, or if an old word is used in a new way and we keep seeing it in the same context, the system will automatically write a new dictionary. So that's how we handle slang.
So could you use the system to generate high credibility speeches?
Not yet. But we do have an alpha version of a text editor. So as you're writing something, it can tell you where you're writing with low credibility, and it can show you your low credibility passages. So you can fix that. So yes, the answer is yes. We'll get that into beta really soon. That's high on our list of things to do. So, any other questions before I keep going? One more in the back.
Quick one. You just mentioned that you can find the new meaning of an existing word.
Yeah.
It seems to me that some government agencies would like that, because that's like
Yeah.
suspect like email or writing code.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great idea. Well, yeah, you're right. Yes. It has to be used repeatedly enough, but we'll find it. So let's look at some other examples. So this is in Clinton's speech. The crowd starts going 4 more years. He's there to nominate Barack Obama, and so you can see this, nice even cadence of really positive sound formations. But on the 5th one, there's a decay. And, Lawrence, if somebody really wants to geek out with Lawrence in the math, I mean, he's got all kinds of rates of decay and acceleration built into these models. So this is not just taking the stuff that's in the intelligence dictionary and making a straight coding of it, but he's got all of this math built into the way he's computing these things, because that's the only way he can really accurately define story arc and find points of dramatic tension. They don't happen in a linear fashion, the fall-off rates. And if you look at this one, there's these kind of negative needs expressions. Oh, we've got a big debt problem. Bill Clinton saying that. Got to reduce the debt. And so then that's sort of this positive peak. And then, this is where it's a little bit of a rant. It's not super low credibility because he's got a little back and forth, but he's going a lot. The tones are going very negative here when he says that future on hold to give tax cuts to upper income people. We've been getting it all along. You just kind of feel the energy really moving down when you say that sentence. So credibility shows up, like I said, when you have an even balance of positive and negative expression. When you have like negative, positive, negative, so the credibility just spikes. And Clinton's saying, in those 52 years, our private economy has produced 66 million private sector jobs. We find an incredibly high correlation between statements of opinion backed by facts and the credibility line going up, as opposed to this statement when he says, we believe that we're all in this together, a far better philosophy than you're on your own, which we all might agree with and think is a credible statement, but it's just an opinion. It's a pretty long one. So we do find that correlation.
So you're saying that it's backed up by facts, but the facts may not be true.
That's true. They might not be. And so we're not necessarily saying whether the fact is true or not, but somebody is at least making an attempt to give
Sound
facts.
credible.
What's that?
To sound credible.
To sound credible. It sounds credible if you're good. We're not looking for statements of fact. This is just based on the sound. We happen to find a high correlation of high credibility statements to statements of fact, whether the facts are true or not.
So is it that facts have a certain sound sometimes?
It's that they just tend to get used within a certain cadence.
Huh.
Somebody, we were brainstorming on this last week, that when we can do speech to text, and there's a Google Glass app, someone talking, this is your BS detector. But everyone will start calling you a glasshole if you do that. Did anyone hear that on NPR the other day? They were talking about glassholes. People wear Google Glass to parties up in Silicon Valley. What are they looking at while they're talking to you? So we'll see if everyone starts wearing it, then it's going to be like performance-enhancing drugs. We'll see. So here's some examples of meaningfulness. I looked at a whole bunch of tweets, actually forum posts about Hurricane Sandy, the day it was washing ashore in New York last fall. These were from Reddit, from just a range of user forums. I pulled them out of Sysomos, a social analytics platform. And so this is an example of a quote that gets a very high meaningfulness score on a 5-point scale. Text messages can often get around network disruptions when a phone call might not get through. Remember, hurricanes bring heavy rain, storm surges, and possible flooding events. Avoid walking or driving through any flooded areas. It only takes 6 inches of fast-moving floodwater to knock over an adult and 2 feet to move a vehicle. They're conveying a lot of information in a couple of sentences, and compare that to something that gets a 0.2. Secondly, the evacuating thing has been talked about for days now. Do you honestly think that when a hurricane is about to hit us, that it isn't talked about? Well, like I said, Long Island, part of New York, is already on the verge of it. So, I can show you hundreds of examples where we get high meaning to good stuff and low meaning to bad stuff. These were some comments about the new BMW electric car that was unveiled on their Facebook page a couple weeks ago. With high meaning, this statement: replace the bumper with a sport one, lower the car just a tad bit more to get rid of the gap, and put some more original BMW wheels on it with a modern twist. None of this smooth, flowery design wheels anymore. Got a lot of opinions, a lot of description, a lot of detail, and a lot of meaningfulness. Low meaningful score in that same thread. It looks good for an electric car. Will grow on you people. Don't hate it so soon. It's not a car for gearheads, and that's why I'll never own one, but I don't hate it. So this is great. I mean, the social media analysts love this because they don't have to look at all that stuff anymore. They don't have to read it. They don't have to count it. And if you're counting those posts and giving them equal weight with these posts in your social media analysis, how accurate is it? You're just doing it by the numbers. Maybe that was a comment that got just vast amounts of sharing. Is the value of a comment like that gets a lot of sharing is equal to the value of a comment like that gets a lot of sharing, or likes or fans, or all the metrics? So I think there's an incredible opportunity to take our API, take our data, mash it up with some of the quantitative measures of social media like cloud scores and Infinograph scores and the social chorus or media index, or even the visible scores that I used to sell. So, like I mentioned earlier, gravitas is a really important metric in our system. When we look for the most important themes, when we look for theme formation, and we look for causal relationships between word clusters and metaphors, we're actually looking for themes that have a high amount of gravitas, that have high credibility in our system and high meaningfulness. These are the best advocates for your brand. You want all the people who talk about your brand to have gravitas. And you want your moderators for your forums and the voice of your brand to have gravitas. Most of the clients we look at have advocacy. It's not bad, but it's actually still a rant. Anything with low credibility is a rant. If you have high meaningfulness and low credibility, you're an advocate, but you're probably still ranting. If you have high credibility and low meaningfulness, you might have presence. It sounds good, maybe you didn't really say anything that important. These are just meaningless rants. This is the stuff that you really want to get rid of. We have a metric called tone, and it's different, a little different than what most people think of as tone. One of our clients gave us two statements that were written, one in the positive and one in the negative. This is when we were still talking about sentiment analysis. We had to get rid of talking about what we do as sentiment analysis because everyone thinks that means we're going to do positive, negative, and neutral like everyone else. And we're about to start doing some testing on that. We think we can do it pretty well, but we really got back to our roots, got back to this notion of emotional intelligence. That's really at the core of what we do. And we want them to understand that, while we're not saying whether one is good or bad, that sometimes you do get these correlations. But so this is, driving a BMW makes me happy and fills me with a special joy. I think everyone should buy a BMW. BMW is such a cool brand. You actually get this dip in thinking. And what that doesn't necessarily mean it's thoughtless, but it means somebody is maybe being less reasonable if you see a dip in thinking. If the blue line goes up, they're being more reasonable. But reasonableness and lack of reasonableness happens all the time. We actually calculate tone as the combination of feeling and needs prorated by the thinking score. I'm still wrapping my head around this. Lawrence just explained this to me a couple of days ago, that this is what we're really doing. This is how we determine positive tone, which is what this graph, the graph of this sentence has, versus negative tone. And the difference between positive and negative tone is that if you have positive tone, you're more resolved in what you're saying. There's more coherent thought behind it. There's more confidence in the expression. Okay? That's what we mean by positive tone. If you have negative tone, there's an opening. You're not as resolved. You're not quite as certain in the statement. So that's how these graph out. So the good news for BMW is that while almost everyone hated this new electric car, most of the people had this negative tone score, so they're not as resolved in their hatred of the car as they could be. So we only saw a few that were negative about the design with positive tone score, meaning really resolution versus tension. The reason Lawrence looks at it this way, the reason we look at it this way is this was originally designed to look for points of thematic resolution from the perspective of long-form narrative of novels. So in brand analysis, this is what I was just talking about. Someone saying, this is the future, then I'd like to stay in the present. Never thought BMW could make such an ugly car. Okay? That is very resolved statement, so that's what we mean by positive tone. This is a similar statement, but according to our calculation, it's slightly negative tone, which means this person is not as resolved. They're asking a lot of questions. There's an opening there to show them more. This is another, we talked about thematics. We looked at, we've looked at an example within a speech. I want to show you example. Well, we looked at one example from Hurricane Sandy already. I showed you an example that had high meaningfulness. This is the spreadsheet of the hundreds of forum posts that were analyzed. And so the one that has the highest thematic score is this from a long Reddit forum about people preparing for the storm. And they're talking about the paramedics in their neighborhood. So they're just literally like, gosh, do we have good paramedics? I might need one, And so this was representing a primary theme, the primary theme out of all of these hundreds of posts from different forums. People were really worried about preparedness. The one that got the second highest thematic score, somebody saying that they're reading conspiracy forums over lunch, makes them sick. People think Obama created the storm using weather modification as an October surprise. Well, there were a lot of people talking about that theory. But there were also a lot of people talking about climate change as a potential reason for why we're seeing stronger storms or more storms, or just whatever the specific weather ingredients happen to be that week. So this was just an example of the causes of the storm, but it wasn't just the conspiracy theories. Impacts and effects. I have a lot of friends and family who are likely to be affected. About a year ago, one of my younger cousins married this nice young fellow who was rescue plane. So, somebody really worried about impacts and effects of the storm. And that's, if you just read through the first 20 or 30, you can see lots of people talking about that. Then I get to the fifth highest. Somebody talking about airborne being dropped over lower Manhattan, so this is really the theme of response and rescue efforts, and if you just read 20 or 30, you see a few more like that. And then the quality of the storm, what's the barometric pressure, and then as an analyst, you can really kind of understand the whole conversation just by reading the first few comments on one of our sheets. So we have a client where their analysts are spending 2 days reading 6,000 comments, and they can now do that same analysis in 1 hour. So it's just a massive savings of time, and it really upscales, up-levels the quality of the analysis the analysts can do. Now instead of having to spend all their time reading through thousands of comments, they can quickly kind of start to look at what are the root causes, what's going on here, and dig a little deeper and write a more thoughtful analysis, and do it much more efficiently, and they're still charging the same amount of money for the reports. So that's a nice example. I want to show you the causal theme formation sheet that maps to this. When we generate that long-form graph, we're identifying the most important themes based on this notion of causality, causal themes that have a lot of gravitas. So it doesn't always happen that the one that gets number 1 on the quote sheet also shows up as a verbatim that is an example of the most important causal themes. But what we did is we identified these words first. These words have lots of causal relationships to other words throughout hundreds of comments about the storm. But what's interesting is this word sister, this word animal. So the root cause, the reason this person is writing about preparedness is because they're worried about their loved ones, their pets. And we saw that very clearly in the other sheet. Somebody, the first sentence is they're worried about their sister, they're worried about their mother. So this is a way to really kind of get a root cause analysis with it. You can do a really deep qualitative level of understanding of what's going on. And so we use this sheet. This is how we generate the themes, like I said, in the graph. Just got a couple more examples, and then we can go into. Gosh, have I been going for an hour? We're almost. I know we won't have enough time for Q&A, so let me just show you one more example, and then we'll just open it back up to Q&A if there are any questions left. But this is a long-form graph of like 20,000 comments about a major retail brand. And everything's kind of flat. There's no themes that are really forming or resolving in terms of seeing those color layers. Along the line, these clusters are what we call resolution points. So we're seeing a theme resolve, meaning that we're getting a lot of statements with positive tone. You'll see the lines start to go up on that theme. So let me back up a little, because this conversation is just going along for hundreds and hundreds of comments with no real resolution taking place. There's a lot of back and forth, people attacking the retailer, people defending the retailer. Then what happens is you get this hot spot in the conversation where the theme is really resonating, where the text is really starting to resonate strongly around many of the themes. This deep purple theme is having the highest degree of resonance. It's about processed foods. And it's also resolving. People are all starting to attack and criticize the brand uniformity and unanimity. And before this line went up, like I said, there's a lot of back and forth. So if I'm the brand, I want to catch this right when it starts. I want an alert that tells me that the community is coalescing around an idea, and that their resolution of this idea is becoming so strong that I may have missed the opportunity to try to redirect this conversation. I've lost control of this conversation. And eventually it starts to die down again. But it wasn't until like about halfway through that the brand started putting their point of view to kind of bring this resolution line down. But they never bring it down through the end of this time period that we analyzed. So I think there's tremendous opportunity for analysts to use our spreadsheets, to use our long-form graph, very quickly understand lots of text. And hopefully, many of you work for companies that have APIs that might be interested in working with us programmatically in building apps, building software that uses the Synapsify API. So, just in conclusion, we just wrap up with a few slides. Like I said, we have this API delivery model. We've got a UI that you can get a free trial on it today. You just send us your text up to 200 kilobytes. We'll send you back a spreadsheet, a graph. So I invite all of you to test it out for free. On the API, you can go to our developer portal and test up to a megabyte of text. We've got a 2-week free trial on our API key. We are emotional intelligence for better analytics. Synapsify is technology that ideally can empower other technology, although we have some specific apps and use cases we want to build, like text editors. This is our developer portal. Thank you very much.
The previous graph that you had, I was wondering if you could bring that up. I have a question about it.
Yeah. The one where I was talking about the retailer?
Yes, that algorithm.
Yeah.
That very bottom graph.
Yeah.
You have clusters of numbers and they don't.
Yeah. So each one of these numbers corresponds to a theme that is either resolving or not resolving at that point in the graph. So here are the numbers of each theme that were automatically identified, automatically generated. The top 15 themes are what we graph.
Okay, then on the graph, they all point to one spot. I mean, those themes are all represented by that.
Exactly. So there's just 3 themes represented at that point. There's 6 themes represented at that point.
So you're analyzing the written speech. So you're analyzing the written speech.
Yeah.
So who delivers it makes no difference in your results. Is that right?
That's right. We're analyzing the text. That's exactly right.
Eric, can you talk a little bit about how I'm still struggling to understand how the system generates the themes. It's doing it by dictionary?
So, this is one of our causality trees. So, this is literally how it's generating the theme. So, this is for MLK's I Have a Dream. So, as best as I understand it, as best as I can explain it, this is the causality tree of what we're saying is the first most important theme of I Have a Dream. We're finding that there are gravitas measurements, so we're looking at meaningfulness and credibility, and causal relationships based on word order. The relationship is unidirectional within the text. So this theme, the way it would form and show up in that legend is that it would say, have, move, bigger. These are words from this paragraph in the speech that we're saying is the most important theme in the speech. So it's have, move, come, a destiny, realize, justice, lift from segregation. Okay. So what we're finding is that there are causal relationships in those words that have been used in a specific order multiple times throughout the speech. Either those exact words or synonyms of those words. And that these words and these themes within this theme have causal relationships to these other themes. And so the more causal relationships to other themes, the more important that theme is, the higher thematic score it gets. So this is this causal tree that's generated using all the algorithms, sound, metaphor, causality, to identify a theme. So it's because that paragraph or those words showed up repeatedly in very meaningful and credible ways.
Hi. Okay. So, obviously, technology, your tools are analyzing these texts, and of course, people create technology. So my question is there any room in your company for someone who graduated college with an English major?
Very likely there will be. I'm an English major, a master's, and like I said, an MFA in creative writing. And so I'm a big fan of English majors. So yeah, give me your card, let's talk. I mean, as we grow, we need quality control. We need people to look at our outputs and say, just give it a sniff test, doesn't look accurate. We'll need account managers to help work with our clients, set up their text and manage expectations around what can be analyzed and what can be learned. So yes, English majors, we want them.
Okay, when I saw the example, that is that you have like retail, like they give, just say like example, retail, they give a lot of comment and you can read like negative and positive. How about if you watch the movie? Just like some movie come out in the entertainment industry, can you give example? Can you read like a ton of...
Can we read screenplays?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we would love to build a better screenplay writer, editor. I know there's some software out there that a lot of screenplay writers are using that kind of helps them have the right story development, the right theme development, right? You have to write in 3 movements and all these rules of screenplay writing. Yeah, I mean, it's a great use case. We just haven't had a chance to analyze scripts yet.
You mentioned your editor product. I was wondering if you could either show or describe it to us.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it.
Is it executable or is it based on the web?
I've got just like a PDF file of it, I think. Let's see. This is it. So, Co-Founders Lab is where we actually implemented our text editor, had it running in alpha. Anyone heard of Co-Founders Lab or used it? It's a site that's for what we do here at Cross Campus. Literally matching co-founders, matching people who have startups, they want help. So you write a mission statement. You have a profile. It's kind of like they have a social network within it. So you write a summary about what you're looking for, and then it starts scoring it using the Synapsify algorithm. Then gives you a recommendation, tips to improve your summary. How would you frame the value proposition of your idea or company? So it's automatically generating these leading questions to get you to write more or write better based on the Synapsify scores that are appearing in the analysis of the text that you just wrote. Responding to the tip by entering more text. So this was just kind of a how-to guide. Now your score is going up. You're getting 5 stars. So this is now the summary of what you're looking for. This is your mission statement that you're putting in your profile, Co-Founders Lab. So it's helping you write a better mission statement that's more descriptive, higher quality, more likely to create a better match in your system.
So the product, does one purchase it? Is it an API or is it?
It's an API. So right now you buy our API, you buy a subscription to it. You can just buy pay-per-use. You actually pay for the amount, basically the amount of data that you push through it.
Okay, so it's not the editor, the Synapsify editor is...
That's not live. This is not a live product. This was something we prototyped for Co-Founders Lab. It's not currently running. So this is something that you can't buy today, but it's something that you've got on our roadmap to build it.
To do what you did there with those spreadsheets, if I want to put some text in and get some analysis out, what do I buy or purchase from you?
So in about a week or two, we hope to make it available where you can just paste some text in here or just upload your spreadsheet. And then it will just bake for from 10 minutes to an hour, depending on how much text you put in. And then you'll get your results. You'll get the spreadsheet, you'll get the long form graph. So right now is a free trial. When you email that to me, then there's a bit of a wait. I can't promise I'm going to give it to you tomorrow. Depending on how much text you give me, we're giving out free samples just by email. But pretty soon you'll just be able to put in your credit card number, put in some text, and get your results right here on this, right through a UI.
So it's not a subscription service?
No,
it's a service per use?
This will just be per use, no subscription needed, use it as much as you want, just pay for what you use. So that's what I showed in that model where we've got apps through our API, and we've got this self-serve model that we're building as well.
From what I've seen tonight, it's a lot of post-game analysis, so to speak. what have you guys done as far as predictive analysis? Being able to look at the social media, we're in a very social text environment these days, being able to see trends before they develop.
Yeah. So we haven't been used that way yet, but I know that you can do some pretty good predictive modeling with social data. So when I was at Visible, I formed a partnership with a company that used to be called Symphony IRI, now called IRI Worldwide. Has anyone ever heard of them? They have a panel that only IRI has and Nielsen has. It's the panel of the people who swipe everything they do with wands, every purchase they make, they log every commercial they watch, every piece of media they consume. So they know all the ad exposure, and they know what they bought. So they're looking at correlations of ad exposure to purchase patterns. That's what IRI does. So when they were taking visible social media data, the volume and sentiment, and running correlations of social media data to that panel data, but they also have the point of sale cash register data. And so they were starting to do some predictive modeling that can impact merchandising, supply chain, inventory ordering, things like that in terms of trends, but also using social data with those types of correlations to really good social media ROI modeling. So I think there are a lot of ways you can use us for that type of predictive analytics, looking at a trend that's emerging or dying out, finding new trends and new themes that can help make better predictions for defense, for threat assessments, but also for a lot of commercial applications as well.
So your API, you have an API available. If you're stripping off text from your social media site or Twitter, and you're feeding those in through the API, what's the response time so you could do a pseudo real-time analysis?
So just in this UI, the way it's hooked up, it takes about a half an hour to run 5,000 or 6,000 Facebook comments through it. So a couple of so if you've got about a megabyte or more, it's going to take about a half an hour. But we're getting ready to virtualize what we call our kernel. We're currently, all of our source code, everything is running on a server in our office in Bethesda, but everything is ready to push out on AWS, so we've tested it. So it really depends how many EC2 instances we open up in AWS. It's going to have a big impact on price and a big impact on speed. But the initial estimates that we've run, some of the calculations are showing that some of the major text analytics companies are too slow. It takes 8 hours to run 20 million comments through. We believe that we can run those same number of comments in about an hour, and that we could run 1 billion comments if we opened up 1,000 instances on AWS.
But do you need 1,000 comments? So I just want to take the first comment I get, push that through. Then as the next one comes in,
so we're developing a real-time. We're developing a real-time API. We don't currently have that bidirectional API where you can just push in a real-time stream and then have it automatically processed. So that's coming. Right now, our API you just push in a batch and then you get back a batch.
Good question with that.
But we're about a month away from that, the real-time bidirectional streaming.
Good question right there.
So you've mapped the English language, every word in every context. Is that natural language processing? Is that the simplest?
Not exactly. That's not what's going on. So what we've mapped is all the possible sounds. Let me rephrase that. All the common sounds that are produced in English. That's what we've mapped. That's the emotional intelligence dictionary. We've also, pulled down a copy of WordNet. Does anybody use WordNet? Princeton has a free online dictionary. So we're doing dictionary lookups against WordNet, and we're adding Wiktionary right now. WordNet's very scientific. Wiktionary has a lot more vernacular, a lot more common usage in it. So we're doing dictionary lookups on the fly through our own version of WordNet that we pulled down. But we're not doing traditional NLP. Although you saw some of that in that causality tree formation, where we are looking at verbs and we are looking at pronouns, we're looking at parts of speech to determine metaphor and to find trigrams and to look for causal relationships between those clusters of words. But we have not mapped all those relationships in a giant database. We do them on the fly.
I'm not sure I'm understanding the connection between the phonetics and the actual definition of the word. Could you just, I don't know if the word was, phonetics.
So, so the phoneme is the indicator of how the word sounds, how you pronounce it. So we've used that sound indicator from the phoneme and grouped together groups of at least 2 phonemes to make what we call like to map to the equivalent of a musical chord. So if you ever played guitar or piano, you have to, if you hold down at least 2 notes, you're creating a chord. Okay. So that's what we're doing. That's how we're using the phoneme. We're looking at the sound implied, translating that into a musical chord, and then looking at the transition. And that's this example here, this slide here, where I showed the emotional intelligence dictionary examples. We talked about these transitions from one chord to the next, and these valences of feeling, thinking, and needs that you see in the long-form graph are coded in. So that's fixed. The meaning that we've attributed to the sounds in English, we're saying are consistent.
It doesn't have anything to do with
doesn't have anything to do with the, it doesn't have anything to do with the dictionary definition. That's
So
completely
sarcasm
independent.
is, analyzes out the same as fact and...
Sort of. Not, well, so we have a metric we call effort. It's when somebody's using a combination of like coerciveness and politeness. We actually call that prissiness. And if you know what the word prissy really means, it's not just a lot of bows, but it's somebody who's trying to act respectable. So they're trying to fit into the norm of the conversation. Sometimes that can show up as sarcasm. But what you see is a big spread. You see a really high positive and a really high negative occurring simultaneously. And that shows that that's what we call prissiness, and it's really what we call effort. So you're making a lot of effort to get their point across, but they're actually being kind of deceptive and coercive. So we don't exactly find sarcasm, but if people are using the same sarcastic expression over and over, create a dictionary entry around it to understand that people meant the opposite.
How does your dictionary evolve? How do these algorithms evolve over time? Because I heard you talk about kind of like learning data. Like if I have a brand and I give you some sample and I say this is what I rate as positive, this is what I rate as negative. This is the kind of comment that's important to me. So I'm thinking, especially if I'm trying to apply it to say a new domain. Let's say I want to look at research articles and I want to see sort of the credibility of the tone, that is evident in the tone of the author, how biased she or he is, etc.
Yeah, you could do that.
How would you do that? I mean, how would you evolve?
Here's an example of where we used exemplars. So this was a whole bunch of comments in USA Today after the second Obama-Romney debate last fall. And so USA Today was interested in testing whether or not we could find comments where someone was really personally attacking another person in the conversation or just being overly aggressive in their commentary. So we created an exemplar set of hundreds of comments that were of the type that represented, personal attacks, overly aggressive types of comments. So then running, thousands of new comments against that set of exemplars, we created this negative quality score. So the stuff that got the highest negative quality score had the highest match to the exemplars showed up first in the list. So that's kind of how it will work, is that we're looking at all the exemplars, we're indexing those, we're finding the themes within those, we're finding the patterns within the exemplars, the patterns of sound, the patterns of credibility. And then when we look at new text, we're finding where do we have the greatest match to that exemplar in terms of all of the types of analytics that we do. Does that answer your question?
Partly, but I guess I'm a little bit sort of curious about how, it seems like your algorithm there of emotional, the chord changes and the phonemes and the emotions it indicates. Does that ever evolve? I mean, does that come from the sage?
It could. I mean,
wisdom of the scientists.
I mean, we think we've tuned it a couple of times. So Lawrence did his spent 3 months and created that dictionary based on a combination of studying music, intuition, studying philosophy, studying a lot of math, and really combined all of those disciplines to code that dictionary. We can change it if we find that something's off. We could tune it to make it more accurate, but he's tuned it to the point where it's really good. Like I said, we're finding a 91% match to human analysts, the way they rank and score these spreadsheets, choosing what they think are more important. But it's not just using the phonemes, it's also using the metaphor and the causality, so it's all three.
I don't know if it would help at all, but do you guys have any plans to factor in being able to like actually analyze like videos of or audio tracks, like and actually jumping right to that? Would that help at all?
Absolutely. Like we're looking right now. Actually, if anyone knows a good audio to text converter, we would like to start sitting right on top of one and see how quickly we can just generate that analysis straight off of audio files. Like I said at one point, we believe we can build the best audio to text converter in the world. It's just not at the top of our roadmap right now. So eventually we'll build that. And to answer your question, yes, we'll be able to just analyze music. Well, the words have to be clear enough to translate into text. So it'll be hard if you've got a song with a lot of sound, music sound in it. But if it's a speech, or a recording of someone talking, or if it's people just the voice audio of a movie or a video, it's just voice audio. Yeah, we'll be able to do that pretty soon. Right now, we need the transcript.
Have you seen how YouTube does it with their automated closed caption?
No, I don't think I've seen that. Is it?
Not very well.
Yeah, I think Bluefin that does the social TV for Twitter, they got bought by Twitter. They were grabbing all that closed caption, all the closed caption data from TV and analyzing it as a way to get to TV data. So there are ways, we'd love to.
Yeah, the Internet Archive also did a whole thing with captioning. You can search all kind of things. I searched some old friends from New York and found them on CNN, that type of thing.
Nice.
Any other questions? Yes? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
See you all next time.